For more on China's property market, we're joined by Anthony Chan, chief economist for Chase. Anthony, as always, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Anthony, there seems to be tremendous divergences in China's housing market. On the one hand, the top-tier cities, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, really accelerating. Shenzhen had a 56% increase year over year. But then you've got tremendous stagnation in the third and fourth tier cities. Regarding the first tier cities, is there concern of a legitimate bubble forming?
Well, when you see that Shenzhen is growing that rapidly, or Shanghai is growing their prices at close to 25% year over year, it does in fact raise some concern of bubble-like behavior. But if you look at the tier 3 and tier 4 cities, those are moving a lot slower. So the solution obviously will be to try to adjust your strategies to pick up demand in the tier 3 and 3 or 4 cities and lower demand in the tier 1 cities.
Well, that is a tricky balance to achieve. So how does the government successfully stimulate third and fourth tiers whilst trying to keep things cooler in the first and second tier cities?
I think that one of the things you could do is try to raise the minimum down payment on mortgages in the tier 1 cities, and try to continue to push that number a little bit lower where you have the excess inventory. You got to remember that close to 90% of all the excess inventory that is still overhanging is in the tier 2 to tier 4 cities. But in tier 1, you basically have virtually a mad dash to try to get properties.
So really just a very different approach in terms of government policies for the first two tiers and lower tiers.
Absolutely.
But which policies have had the most success in stimulating home sales?
Well, it's very clear that a year or year and a half ago, the housing market was a lot softer, and as the government decided to go ahead and lower the minimum down payments, as the government also tried to add more liquidity to the economy, that benefits all the markets. All of that, along with fiscal stimulus, all these things help. But if you want to target just housing, you're going to have to really use a surgical procedure to get the job done.
Different rules for different markets.
Absolutely.
In essence. How much does the stock market play in here in terms of Chinese perhaps being a little reluctant to put their money in the stock market following the correction we saw last summer, last August? Are they now being attracted again to the housing market in the top tier cities?
Oh, there's no question, Michelle, because when you look at the equity market and you're comparing it to, say, the U.S. equity market on a year-to-date basis, the Chinese Shanghai equity market index, or the CSI 3000, all those are completely underperforming. So local residents are moving away from the equity market into the property market. And so when you start to see the equity market picking up again, you'll see again that migration back.
That seesaw between where the money's going. Anthony, a big buzzword, urbanization. And part of the government's policy is to encourage migrant workers to move to those second, third, fourth tier cities. What are the policies that they're enacting to do that?
Oh, I think that they're making some progress. They're trying to work on the registration, so when these migrants come, they feel right at home, and they certainly have the rights of the local population. So moving in that direction, there's some talk that they'll move as much as 100 million migrants and give them the rights, or the local rights. That's important. There are 270 million migrant workers out there. About 1% of them own residences. So that's a potential opportunity, considering the fact that the estimates suggest that anywhere from 30 to 90 million residences are vacant. So if you get even half of all those migrant workers to move in the direction of home ownership, that will solve the problem.
But can they actually afford to buy a home? Are they making enough money?
They are not making enough money, but the way the government can actually do that is to perhaps provide some subsidies, not just lower the minimum down payment, but also have the government provide subsidies. That will simply be a lot better than leaving these residences vacant. So with some subsidies, I think these migrants can do it, and of course, allowing them local rights and allowing the registration.
Working on the registration system there. Well, you know, Anthony, there's concern that what's happening in the Chinese housing market is reminiscent of what we saw in the Japanese housing market circa 1990. The Chinese government says this is not the case. What are your thoughts?
I think that the Chinese government is being a lot more proactive than, say, the Japanese. Part of the reason is that they learn from the mistakes that the Japanese made. And I think that if they continue to move in the direction of being more proactive in trying to address the issue, they'll be able to arrest it. It's not very easy to provide these subsidies for all these vacant homes, anywhere from 30 to 90 million residences. But it is a step in the direction, in that right direction, and they can probably start by just moving gradually in that fashion, just to at least absorb some of that vacant housing, because right now the estimates are that they have as much as 3 years worth of inventory
And
out
how
there.
do we keep a lid on the hot markets in the Tier 1 cities?
Very easily. You don't do anything to stimulate housing demand in the Tier 1 cities, and do everything you can to stimulate demand in the lower tier cities.
All right. As always, thank you so much.